Good morning. My name's Chris, and welcome to Latitude Live. So what happened to your events calendar? Where are all your picnics, your garden parties? Every one of us that's involved in event planning has watched as our calendars disappeared right before our eyes. All that planning, all of that preparation, poof. I mean, sure, we can lock it all down now and dust it off again for next year, maybe? But then what's the rest of this year going to look like? We have talked a lot about virtual programming options and solutions, but as the states open up, the opportunity to go back to in-person events is very, very tempting. So how do we do that in a way that is safe, sane, and makes us look responsible? How can we host social events socially distanced? The most important question you need to ask yourself in returning to live events is the most obvious one. Can we do this safely? Now, this is not a question that relies strictly on state guidelines. In fact, state requirements should be the minimum standard of safety that you use to judge your programming as you move forward. CDC standards and recommendations are a good tool when it comes to planning out sanitization and distancing guidelines, and a lot of the information that you can find, that you need to find for that, can be found on their website. But I wouldn't exclusively rely on that. Standards change quickly. And often without warning. I mean, here in Massachusetts, just this past week, we went from an approved 100-person outdoor events to 50-person outdoor events. The announcement was made on a Friday, and it's in full effect today, which is Tuesday. So you have to be prepared to pivot. You have to plan ahead that the possibility that you might need to make a dramatic adjustment to your plan is going to be necessary in order to move forward. Now, once you have a plan in place and you've made arrangements for these contingencies, you need to effectively execute and apply that plan. And there are a lot of things that you have to consider. How do you make sure people maintain the appropriate distancing? And what about food service? How do you make sure that what you are serving is being handled correctly? And are the lines being managed appropriately? How about kicking your event off? How do you address arrival modeling to accommodate all of your guests? What about emergency and evacuation plans? To be honest, probably the most critical aspect of this discussion is what's going to make your attendees feel the safest. We don't really have time to address all of those items that I mentioned just a few moments ago, but they'll actually make excellent topics for future videos. But what I do want to address is that critical aspect that I mentioned earlier. The answer to the question of what will make my attendees feel safest is the easiest one. Stick to your plan. If you've created a plan and you've publicly announced it, stick to it. If you announce that your event requires masks, then enforce that requirement. Listen, one person showing up claiming that they have rights is not a reason to deviate from your established rules. It's your event. The rest of the people in attendance are there because they all agreed to the rules, and they're expecting others to adhere to them as well. If you make exceptions, then you're telling the rest of your guests that you are unreliable and that you're not consistent. And the last thing that you want to do is shake the faith of your major donors. Be empowered to enforce your own rules. Now, event planners nowadays, it's kind of ridiculous. You are forced to be equal parts social engineer, enforcement officer, fortune teller, and event executor. It isn't easy. I will say there are a number of software solutions and planning programs that have become available that can help you with this. And they do take into account social distancing standards and can be modified state by state. If you have the time to spend developing and learning a new system, I'd encourage you to do so because these tools can be a huge help. Some organizations out there don't have the time to learn an entirely new program while still keeping to their event schedule, even if it's an adapted one. To be honest, it's one of the reasons why I started New Latitude in the first place, is to help organizations like yours, if you're struggling with this, to navigate these very confusing waters. These tools and these programs are part of our programming language and our planning language, and it can take a lot of pressure off of smaller organizations. Regardless of how you approach it, make sure you use all of the tools that are out there and do your research. It can be extraordinarily beneficial for you in executing a well-performed, well-presented event. Thanks for joining us today. If your organization could use a new creative approach, or you're trying to figure out how to make these socially distanced events happen and make them stand out, give us a call. New Latitude Consulting helps you to reimagine your development goals and bring your events to a new latitude. You can find us on Facebook, or you can email me at chris@newlatitudeconsulting. Join us August 19th, that's next Wednesday, for the first in our monthly series, Lunch with Latitude. Yes, we've had to move the date off a little bit, but we are coming at it next Wednesday. We're going to have a fantastic panel that spans parts of the East Coast. We've got some folks from Florida and some folks from up here in Massachusetts, and they're going to be discussing some of the very issues that your organization may be struggling with. Specifically, this one is going to deal with how to pivot your programming, how you've had to take practical programming and reinterpret it and reimagine it in a virtual format. Please join us. We hope that you will enjoy your lunch with Latitude. New Latitude Consulting, elevate your expectations.